The wind from Lake Michigan blew in, cutting through thin coats like frigid ice blades. Chicago in November was not for the weak, and certainly not for the poor. Ethan Cole stood before the cracked mirror in the bathroom of his dingy South Side studio apartment. He tightened his navy silk tie, the only designer item left from his previous life. The collar of his shirt was slightly frayed, but if one didn't look closely under the fluorescent light, they wouldn't notice. "Daddy?" A faint voice came from the single bed in the corner of the room. Ethan turned, a smile immediately appearing on his gaunt face to mask his worry. Maya, his 7-year-old daughter, was rubbing her eyes. She was frail, swallowed up by the old comforter. Beside her headboard was the nebulizer, Maya's constant companion since she was diagnosed with chronic asthma. "Good morning, Princess." Ethan walked over, placing a hand on her forehead. "Warm, but no fever, thank God. Daddy has an important meeting today. Mrs. Higgins will come and look after you." Maya looked at her father's suit, her eyes lighting up. "Are you going to build skyscrapers?" Ethan's heart tightened. It had been 2 years since his wife Sarah died of cancer, leaving him with astronomical medical debt and a broken heart. 2 years he'd spiraled from a promising architect to a delivery driver, a painter, anything for instant cash to buy his daughter's medicine. "That's right." Ethan kissed her forehead. "I'm going to Sterling and Associates. If things go well, we won't have to worry about the heating bill anymore." He didn't dare tell her about the red eviction notice plastered on the refrigerator door. Sterling and Associates was more than an architectural firm. It was a sanctuary in Chicago. The senior architect position he was interviewing for offered a $120,000 annual salary and, most importantly, comprehensive platinum-level health insurance. It was the last remaining lifeline in this ocean of despair. Ethan stepped out of the subway station in the Loop at 8:15 a.m. Skyscrapers pierced the gray sky. He took a deep breath, smelling concrete, Starbucks coffee, and money. The interview was at 9 a.m. He had plenty of time to compose himself. He walked along Michigan Avenue, rehearsing his answers about sustainable design philosophy. Suddenly, the crowd ahead of him stopped. A minor commotion. Ethan was about to walk past. In this city, a homeless person collapsing or street arguments were commonplace. He couldn't let anything distract him. The goal was the Sterling Tower, 3 blocks away. But then, a sound echoed. Not a scream, but a wheezing breath. The rasp of a lung closing up. The instinct of a father with an asthmatic child made Ethan whirl around. Through the gaps in the winter coats, he saw a young girl, perhaps only 15 or 16. She lay on the cold pavement, clutching at her throat, her face beginning to turn blue. A half-eaten cookie lay nearby. The crowd around her formed in a motionless circle. A few people held up their phones to film. "Probably high," a man in a leather jacket muttered. "Step away, don't touch her." Another woman pulled her husband away. Ethan checked his watch, 8:35 a.m. If he stopped, he would risk everything. But looking at the girl, he saw Maya. "Move aside," Ethan shouted, his voice ringing with authority, startling the crowd into parting. He threw his briefcase containing his job application files onto the wet sidewalk and knelt beside the girl. "Can you hear me? What's your name?" Ethan asked urgently, checking her pulse. It was rapid and weak. Her lips were swollen. She couldn't answer, her eyes wide with panic, tears streaming down her face. "Anaphylactic shock," Ethan muttered. He looked around. "Someone call 911, now!" He frantically searched her designer handbag. Lipstick, wallet, phone, but no medicine. Damn it. She was suffocating in his hands. Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out an EpiPen, the emergency dose he always carried for Maya,
The one that cost him $600 without insurance. Sorry, Maya. Then removed the safety cap. Listen, kid, I'm giving you a shot. It'll hurt a bit, but you'll be able to breathe. He forcefully jabbed the needle into her thigh, through her jeans, holding it still for 10 seconds. The girl jolted, and then a great rush of air whistled into her lungs. Her skin color began to return to pink. She coughed violently, clutching Ethan's suit sleeve, leaving streaks of saliva and dirt on it. "Where's the ambulance?" Ethan roared. "They said 15 minutes. Traffic is terrible," a passerby replied.
15 minutes. Ethan looked at his watch. 8:45 a.m. He still had time. He started to stand up, but the girl's hand clung tightly to him, shaking violently. The shock could recur. If he left now and she stopped breathing again, no one here knew how to handle it. Ethan looked toward the gleaming Sterling Tower in the distance. Then he looked down at the girl, shivering with cold and fear. He took off his suit jacket, his only armor, and draped it over her. He sat there, holding her shoulder, whispering reassurances until the wailing sirens grew near. By the time the paramedics loaded the girl onto the stretcher and the police finished taking his preliminary statement, the clock read 9:40 a.m. Ethan ran like a madman toward the Sterling Tower. He was without his jacket, wearing only a white shirt stained with road dust and the remnants of the emergency. His hair was disheveled by the wind. He burst into the grand lobby, where the marble floor reflected his pathetic image. "I'm Ethan Cole," he gasped, leaning on the reception desk. "I had an interview with Mr. Sterling at 9 a.m. There was an urgent accident." The receptionist, who looked perfectly cut from a magazine, looked at him over her horn-rimmed glasses. She glanced at the clock, then down at her list. "It is 9:50 a.m., Mr. Cole." "I know. I apologize. I was saving someone on the street." "Sir," she interrupted, her voice cold but polite, "we hear dozens of excuses every day. Traffic jams, broken trains, sick dogs, and now playing the hero. Mr. Sterling values punctuality above all else. You missed the appointment. We have called the next person." "Please," Ethan pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. "Just 5 minutes. Look at my portfolio. I won the Chicago Architecture Award in 2018. "Mr. Cole, please leave before I call security." Ethan stood there, stunned. He saw well-dressed office workers pass by, looking at him with pity mixed with disdain. He was a failure. A failure without a suit jacket. That night, Ethan sat in the darkness of his apartment. Maya was fast asleep. He looked at the eviction notice. He had lost his daughter's EpiPen, lost the job opportunity, and was perhaps about to lose their home. He couldn't collapse. He wasn't allowed to. The next day, Ethan went to a temporary employment agency. "I need work. Anything," he told the agent. "Night shifts are best."
"We're short of cleaners for Class A office buildings in the Loop," the agent said, looking at Ethan's resume with suspicion. "You're an architect. Are you sure you want to scrub toilets?" "I need money. Immediately." And fate, with its cruel sense of humor, led him back to the very place that had rejected him, Sterling and Associates Tower. A month passed. Ethan, now employee ID 4092, pushed a gray cleaning cart along the 40th floor corridor. He wore oversized blue overalls, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Work started at 10 p.m. and finished at 6 a.m. He emptied trash, wiped fingerprints off glass doors, and vacuumed expensive carpets. The irony was bitter. He was allowed into these magnificently designed rooms, but only to clean up the remnants of people living the life he once dreamed of. But Ethan had a secret. Around 3 a.m., when the building was deathly silent, he often stopped at the central design studio. He would look at the blueprints, the 3D models. His eyes were no longer those of a janitor, but reverted to those of a sharp architect. Tonight, on the largest desk, CEO Marcus Sterling's desk, A massive blueprint was spread out. The New Era Library Project, a $200 million construction. Ethan didn't intend to look, but the flaw jumped out at him immediately. The glass dome structure. They were using a single-point load-bearing beam system for aesthetics, but with Chicago's lakeside wind force, the resonant vibration would cause the glass to crack after just 2 winters. He looked around. Security cameras were rolling, but this corner was a blind spot. An internal struggle ensued. "You're just a cleaner, Ethan. Don't worry about it." But his professional conscience wouldn't allow him to ignore it. A mistake like this could endanger thousands of people. Ethan pulled a yellow sticky note, a cheap one he'd found, from his pocket. He took his dull pencil and quickly sketched a solution, replacing the single beam with a diode structure. It would not only solve the load-bearing issue, but also create a beautiful shadow effect across the main lobby. He taped the note onto the blueprint, right next to the flaw, and quickly pushed his cart away before the security guard made his round. The next morning, the Sterling and Associates office was in turmoil.
Marcus Sterling, the man dubbed Chicago's Steel King, stood before the blueprint, his face grim. Around him, design department heads trembled. "Who," Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous, "who taped this here?" No one dared to speak up. "I pay you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and none of you noticed this beam would kill people." Marcus tapped the blueprint hard, and someone, an anonymous person, fixed it with a genius solution. "I want to know who it is." The entire office was silent. They thought it was a test from the boss, or maybe a rival architect sneaking in for a prank. No one considered the invisible man who cleaned the building every night. 3 days later, a snowstorm hit Chicago. Traffic was paralyzed. Marcus Sterling decided to stay late at the office to prepare for the library project presentation. But he wasn't alone. Chloe, his 16-year-old daughter, had come to the office earlier in the day to escape the suffocating atmosphere at home. Since her near-fatal accident on the street last month, Marcus had become overly protective, smothering her. 2 a.m. Ethan was mopping the floor in the 40th floor waiting area. He heard footsteps. He kept his head down, continuing to push the mop. Rule number 1. The invisible man does not interact with the people above. "Hey, excuse me?" A young female voice rang out. Ethan stopped, but didn't look up. "Sorry, I'm working. I'll move somewhere else right away." "Are you hungry? I ordered too much pizza." Ethan looked up. Standing before him was a young girl with purple-streaked hair holding a pizza box. And then time seemed to stop. Ethan recognized the girl. Those eyes. The eyes that had rolled back with lack of oxygen on Michigan Avenue. And Chloe recognized him, too. Even with the hat, the baggy overalls, and how much thinner he looked, she never forgot the deep eyes and the calm voice that held her to life. The pizza box fell to the floor. "It's you," Chloe whispered, her hands shaking. "The hero."
Just then, the CEO's office door burst open. Marcus stepped out, alerted by the sound. "Chloe, what's going on?" Chloe turned, tears welling up. She pointed at Ethan. "Dad, it's him! The man I told you about! The one who gave me the shot on Michigan Avenue!" Marcus Sterling was stunned. He looked at the janitor standing hunched over a bucket of dirty water. He had hired a private investigator, placed ads in the newspaper searching for the benefactor who saved his only daughter's life, but to no avail, because the street camera was broken that day. The only clue was a man wearing a suit, but no jacket. He walked slowly toward Ethan. His sharp eyes scanned the name tag on the chest of the overalls. Ethan. "It's you?" Marcus asked, his usual powerful voice replaced by a tremor. I sighed. He couldn't hide anymore. He took off his baseball cap. "I'm glad she's okay," he said softly. "I apologize for dirtying the floor. I'll clean it right away." "Clean what the hell?"
Marcus strode forward, gripping Ethan's shoulder. "You saved my entire world. Why are you here, doing this job?" He offered a sad smile. "Because, that day, by stopping to save your daughter, I was late for the interview at this very company, and I was dismissed. I needed money to feed my child, Mr. Sterling, so I'm doing what I have to do." A silence heavier than reinforced concrete enveloped the room. Marcus Sterling, a man who never bowed his head, now felt a wave of shame surge in his throat. It was his rigid adherence to principles, the punctuality culture he was so proud of, that had crushed his family's benefactor. He glanced down at Ethan's shirt pocket. A small notebook was sticking out. Marcus pulled it out before Ethan could react. He opened it. The pages were covered in dense sketches. Ideas for building renovations, subtle architectural details. And on the last page, the detailed sketch of the diagrid structure for the library project. The drawing matched the yellow sticky note perfectly. Marcus looked at Ethan, his eyes burning. "You didn't just save my daughter. You saved my project too. You are the phantom architect. I am just a father who needs a job." Marcus looked at his daughter, then back at Ethan.
Take off those clothes, Ethan. Tomorrow, you won't be pushing a trash cart. You'll be sitting in the office next to mine. You're hired. It was a fairy tale moment. Cinderella finds the prince. The good man is rewarded. Ethan cried. He thought of Maya, of health insurance, of a warm home. He thought all the suffering was over. But Ethan was wrong. Walking into the castle doesn't mean you'll be welcomed at the feast. The real challenge was just beginning. News spread through the Sterling and Associates tower faster than the elevator. The 40th floor janitor is now an architect. The boss's daughter's savior. A fairy tale or a joke of nepotism? Ethan's first day didn't start with flowers and applause. It began with cold silence. Marcus Sterling kept his word. He advanced Ethan a small amount to buy clothes. Ethan walked into the office in a perfectly fitted charcoal gray suit, but he felt like he was wearing a costume. He was led to a glass-walled desk overlooking Lake Michigan, a position many had strived 5 years for. "Welcome, Mr. Cole." Julian Thorne, the head of design, walked over. Julian was a man in his 40s, meticulously groomed, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was the company's star before Ethan appeared, and the author of the flawed dome design Ethan had corrected. "I hear you have very skillful hands," Julian said, his tones smooth but sharp. "I hope your mouse skills are as good as your mopping skills." A few chuckles sounded from the surrounding desks. Ethan clenched his fists but maintained a professional smile. "I'll do my best, Julian." "Good, because here we don't use paper and pencil anymore. We use Revit and Rhino. Have you updated to the latest version, or are you still living in 2018? It was the first attack, and it hit home. For the past 2 years, Ethan had only worried about earning money for medicine and food. He didn't have money for software licenses, no high-spec computer to practice on. Architectural technology changed daily. What he knew was obsolete. That afternoon, Ethan sat in front of a curved 34-inch monitor. He opened the software and felt lost. The shortcuts had changed, the interface was unfamiliar. He fumbled for 30 minutes just to create a basic 3D model that the Gen Z interns next to him completed in 5 minutes.
The scrutinizing eyes of his colleagues felt like needles in his back. They whispered, "Look, he even has to Google how to use the extrude command. Boss Marcus must be senile. Saving someone is one thing, design is another." Ethan felt cold sweat trickle down his spine. Imposter syndrome set in, suffocating him more than poverty ever had.
He realized he was no longer a hidden genius. He was an aging dinosaur trying to learn to dance in the digital age. Having a high-paying job doesn't mean you stop being poor instantly. That was the cruel reality movies often omit. Ethan's salary was paid bi-weekly. Marcus's advance had been spent on work clothes and paying part of the overdue rent to avoid immediate eviction. But he still owed for electricity, gas, and most importantly, his refrigerator was empty. While his colleagues went to expensive restaurants in the Loop for $25 salads, Ethan quietly hid in the fire escape stairwell. He pulled out a stale peanut butter sandwich, his lunch ration for the week. He was hungry. The gnawing hunger made his hands tremble when he held the mouse. And worse than hunger was shame. One lunchtime, Julian Thorne walked into the break room while Ethan was pouring tap water into his stomach to appease the hunger. "Ethan, aren't you eating with everyone? We're discussing the library project. You should join to learn." I brought my lunch," Ethan lied, concealing the empty plastic container. Julian smirked, his eyes sweeping over Ethan's leather shoes. Though polished to a shine, the soles were worn thin. A sophisticate like Julian noticed immediately. "Saving money is good, but don't let poverty infect your design. Sterling's clients prefer luxury, not frugality." The remark felt like a slap. That afternoon, Ethan received a text from Mrs. Higgins, his neighbor. "Ethan, Maya's nebulizer is broken. She's having trouble breathing. Can you come home right away?" Ethan checked the clock. 3 p.m. He was on the job. If he left early in his first week, he would confirm everyone's prejudice that he was unprofessional. But Maya was everything. He rushed into Marcus's office to ask permission. Marcus looked at him over his reading glasses.
Ethan, I gave you a chance, but I can't keep giving you preferential treatment. This is a business, not a charity. If you leave now, you'll miss the meeting with the structural engineers. I apologize, Marcus. My daughter... All right, go. Marcus sighed in disappointment. But remember, Julian is eager to give your position to his own person. Don't give him an excuse. Ethan rushed home, his heart heavy. He used his last few dollars to buy a used nebulizer from a pawn shop. That night, watching Maya struggle to breathe in the cold apartment because he hadn't had enough money to pay the debt to restore the heating gas, Ethan wondered, was he really strong enough to hold on to this opportunity, or was he just climbing higher to fall harder? Third week of work, the New Era Library project entered the final stretch. Ethan was responsible for designing the main lobby interior where he had proposed the diagrid idea. Julian Thorne handed Ethan the zoning codes for the lakeside area. "These are the latest city regulations. Base your ceiling height and materials on these," Julian said, tossing the thick binder onto his desk. Ethan stayed awake for 3 nights at the office. He didn't dare go home because the office had heat and free coffee. He worked like a madman, trying to compensate for his software skills gap with sheer diligence and innate aesthetic sense. He created a stunning design, a 15-meter-high ceiling clad in reclaimed oak wood, combined with natural light, creating the feeling of a forest of knowledge. The day of the presentation to the board and city representatives arrived. Ethan stood before the large screen, presenting confidently. He saw Marcus's look of satisfaction. He saw the city officials nodding. "This is an iconic design," Ethan concluded his presentation. "It connects people with nature." The room was silent, awaiting feedback. Suddenly, the representative from the city planning department spoke, his voice sharp. "The design is beautiful, Mr. Cole, but it violates the law." Ethan was stunned. "I beg your pardon?" "This lakeside area is within the migratory bird conservation zone. According to an amendment last year, ceilings cannot use more than 30% reflective material, and the maximum permissible height is 12 meters to avoid affecting flight paths. Your design is 15 meters high and uses too much glass."
Ethan turned to look at Julian. "But In the file you gave me. Julian stood up, feigning surprise. Ethan, I sent you an email update on the ecological buffer zone regulations last Monday. Didn't you read the email? Ethan was frozen. He searched his memory. There was no email. Or perhaps it was in the spam folder. Or had Julian forgotten to send it? I didn't receive it, Ethan stammered. As a senior architect, Marcus Sterling interjected, his voice ice-cold, devoid of the warmth of a grateful father. It is your responsibility to cross-check legal regulations, due diligence. Blaming a colleague is not how we work here. This project is due tomorrow. If we don't have a revised plan, we will lose the contract to the competition. Ethan, you have wasted everyone's time. The meeting ended in disaster. Ethan stood alone. Julian walked past, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. Go back to mopping the floor, hero. Ethan was suspended for 3 days for performance review. It was a euphemism for imminent firing. He trudged out of the tower. Snow was beginning to fall in Chicago again. Arriving home, he saw his landlord standing outside the door. Ethan, time's up. I gave you 2 extra weeks because you said you had a new job, but I don't see the money. You need to leave, right now. Please, Mr. Miller, just a few more days. No, I have a new tenant ready to pay cash. That night, Ethan and Maya were out on the street. He packed all their clothes, Maya's old teddy bear, and the nebulizer into his rusty 2005 Honda Civic. Are we going camping, Daddy? Maya asked innocently, though she was shivering. That's right, car camping. It'll be fun, Ethan said, tears streaming inward. He drove to the parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart, the only place that was safe and lit. He piled all the blankets onto Maya, started the car every 15 minutes to turn on the heat, then turned it off to save gas. In the middle of the night, Maya had an asthma attack. He searched for medicine. Empty. He looked in his wallet. Exactly $12 left. Not enough for a new dose. The company insurance hadn't activated the physical card yet. Despair choked Ethan. He was a top firm's architect, yet his child was suffocating in a smelly car in a supermarket parking lot. Where had he gone wrong? He saved a life. He worked hard. Why did life keep crushing him? Ethan slumped over the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. He wanted to give up. He wanted to call Marcus and beg for money. But the last shred of his self-respect stopped him. If he begged now, he would forever be the grateful beggar. He would lose his final respect. But Maya's wheezing pulled him back to reality. He couldn't quit, not for him, but for Maya. Ethan wiped his tears. He pulled out his phone, connecting to Walmart's free Wi-Fi. He opened his laptop, the company machine he hadn't yet returned. He didn't open his apology email. He opened the design software. Julian wants to play dirty. Fine. Ethan mumbled, his red eyes burning with fierce determination. He accessed the city's public data system, downloaded all the lakeside zoning plans. He realized Julian hadn't just hidden the ceiling height from him. Julian was designing a backup plan, Plan B, to submit in Ethan's place. Julian's plan was safe, legal, but ugly and expensive. Ethan started to draw. In the cramped car, under the faint yellow light of the street lamp, with numb fingers, Ethan Cole drew the design of his life. He didn't lower the ceiling. He changed its structure. He designed a retractable dome system and used electrochromic smart glass that automatically dimmed to eliminate reflection. It not only met the migratory bird regulation, but turned the building into a living entity, one that breathed with nature. More importantly, he calculated the cost. His plan was 20% cheaper than Julian's by using lighter materials. He worked for 24 hours straight. Maya slept, woke up to eat bread, and then slept again. Ethan neither ate nor slept.
Monday morning, Judgment Day.
Marcus Sterling sat in the conference room, his face etched with disappointment. Julian Thorne stood presenting his Plan B. Gentlemen, due to Mr. Cole's negligence, I had to work all weekend to deliver this safe solution. The conference room door flew open. Ethan walked in. His suit was wrinkled from sleeping in the car. His face was stubbled. His eyes were deeply shadowed. But his demeanor radiated a ferocious energy that silenced the entire room. "Apologies for being late," Ethan said, his voice hoarse, "but I think you need to see this before signing the contract." "You're suspended, Ethan," Julian snapped. "Security!" "Let him speak," Marcus raised a hand. He saw the desperation and madness in Ethan's eyes, the same look as the night he corrected the blueprint on his desk. Ethan plugged a USB drive into the projector. The 3D model appeared, not a static blueprint. It was a dynamic render video. The building looked like a giant lotus flower, opening to welcome the sun and closing when birds flew overhead. "I didn't just fix the height error," Ethan said, looking straight at Marcus. "I turned a disadvantage into a signature feature. This isn't a static library. This is the world's first ecological library." He turned to Julian. "And Julian, thank you for forgetting to send me the email. Because of that hardship, I was forced to find a solution more creative than lazily lowering the ceiling." The entire conference room was stunned. Ethan's solution wasn't just beautiful, it was genius. It solved the legal, aesthetic, and economic problems simultaneously. Marcus Sterling stood up. He walked toward the screen, touching the reflected image. How did you do this in 2 days?" "When a man has nothing left to lose, Mr. Sterling," Ethan said softly, "he finds a strength he never knew he had." Marcus turned to Julian. Julian's face was pale. The comparison between the two plans was stark. One was a draftsman, the other was an artisan. "This project is yours, Ethan," Marcus announced. "And Julian, I want to see you in my office after the meeting. We need to discuss internal email protocols." Ethan sighed in relief. His legs buckled. He had won. But he still had no money. Immediately after the meeting, Ethan collapsed right in the main lobby. His body was exhausted after days of starvation and extreme stress. The smell of antiseptic stung Ethan's nostrils, pulling him out of the darkness. He blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. White ceiling, the steady beep of a heart monitor, and the genuine warmth of a wool blanket. The hospital. Memories flooded back. The meeting, the victory over Julian, and then the darkness. Ethan bolted up, panic gripping his heart. "Maya!" he cried out, his voice raw. "Maya is in the car!" A firm hand rested on his shoulder, pressing him back down. "Calm down, Ethan. She's safe." Ethan turned. Sitting in the plastic chair beside the hospital bed was Marcus Sterling. The powerful CEO looked 10 years older than he had that morning. His suit jacket was draped over the chair, his tie loosened, and he held a cup of cold coffee. "Where is she?" Ethan asked, his breathing shallow. "She has asthma. It's freezing." "She's in pediatrics, downstairs. The doctor said she had acute bronchitis from the cold, but they've stabilized her. Chloe is there reading her a story." Ethan slumped back onto the pillow, tears of relief streaming down his face. Marcus remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Ethan's calloused hands. "When you collapsed, security found your car keys in your pocket. We intended to drive your car home for you, but we found the child curled up in the back seat, amidst a pile of blankets and bread wrappers." Marcus looked up, his voice trembling with an unreadable emotion, a mix of anger and sorrow.
Why didn't you tell me? You are the lead architect on a $200 million project, and you were living in a rusty car in the Chicago winter? Ethan turned his face away, looking out the window where snow was falling heavily. I didn't want to be a charity case, Marcus. You gave me the job because I saved your daughter. If I held out my hand for money again, what would I have left? Self-respect is the only thing I had managed to hold on to.
Self-respect? Marcus stood up, his voice sharp. Ethan, you saved my daughter's life. Do you think Chloe's life is only worth a trial job opportunity? What kind of man do you think I am, to let my benefactor starve while he makes my company rich? He took a deep breath to compose himself. When the nurses took off your shirt for examination, they said you were severely malnourished. How long have you been starving yourself? To give your portion to your daughter? Ethan didn't answer. The answer was obvious on his thin frame. Marcus sat back down, his voice softer now. I fired Julian, not just because he sabotaged the project, but because he created a toxic work environment that prevented you from speaking up. That is my fault for poor management. He pulled a check and a set of keys from his pocket. This is not charity. This is the signing bonus you should have received from day one, which HR negligently delayed. And these are the keys to the company apartment reserved for senior staff. It's right near the best school district. Ethan opened his mouth to refuse. Don't, Marcus held up a hand. Don't argue. Think of Maya. You can endure hardship, but she cannot. Let me repay this debt of gratitude fairly. Starting tomorrow, you will repay me with your talent. But today, let me be a friend. Ethan took the keys, the cold metal in his hand, but it carried the warmth of a promise for the future. Thank you, he whispered. Recovery did not happen overnight. Ethan and Maya stayed in the hospital for 3 more days. During those 3 days, Chloe visited daily. She brought an iPad, toys, and even her homework so Maya wouldn't be bored. The sight of the CEO's spoiled daughter sitting on the floor playing Lego with the poor little girl was the most beautiful thing Ethan had ever seen. Upon discharge, they moved straight to the new apartment. It wasn't huge, but cozy, with a working heater and a fridge full of food Chloe herself had bought from the supermarket. The first night in the new home, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced, checking the windows, checking the heater, afraid it was just a dream and he would wake up to the cold ceiling of his car. Only when he saw Maya sleeping soundly in a soft bed, her breathing steady and wheeze-free, did he allow himself to cry. Tears released 2 years of pent-up tension. But the work challenges remained. Ethan returned to the office with a new status. Julian was gone, but the pressure from the library project was even greater. All eyes were on his bold Lotus design. Contractors doubted the feasibility. The budget was tight. Ethan worked frantically, but this time he was not alone. He hired a team of young assistants, the ones Julian had once looked down on. He taught them how to draw by hand, how to feel materials, and in turn, they taught him the most advanced software techniques. His office was no longer closed off. It became a loud creative workshop where every idea was heard, even from interns. Some nights, technical blueprints had fatal flaws that seemed impossible to resolve. The smart glass system was too expensive. Ethan didn't give up. He remembered his days as a painter, a mechanic. He personally went down to the fabrication workshop, working with the welders to find ways to manufacture cheaper yet sturdier steel frames. He wasn't just a desk architect. He was a creator, forged in harsh reality. His colleagues' respect grew daily, not because he was the boss's friend, but because he was the first to arrive and the last to leave, the man who remembered the name of every security guard and janitor. 2 years later, spring had returned to Lake Michigan. The wind no longer cut the skin, but brought cool, fresh air. Today was the inauguration of the New Era Library. Hundreds of reporters, city officials, and citizens gathered before the magnificent architectural structure. The building looked unlike anything Chicago had ever seen. It was soft,
flowing like waves, and the massive glass dome reflected the glittering but gentle sunlight. Ethan Cole stood on the honored podium. He wore a custom-made Tom Ford suit, a birthday gift from Marcus. His hair had a few gray streaks after 2 years of hard work, but his eyes were bright, and his demeanor exuded the poise of a man who had conquered fate. In the front row of the audience sat his family. Maya, now 9, taller and healthier, waved to her father. She no longer carried the nebulizer. Sitting beside Maya was Chloe Sterling, now a first-year architecture student, holding Maya's hand like a sister, and Marcus Sterling, looking at Ethan with the proud eyes of an older brother.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan began his speech, his voice echoing through the speakers. Architecture is not about concrete and steel. Architecture is about shelter. It is about creating a space where people feel safe, welcomed, and inspired. He looked down at the crowd, his eyes pausing on a janitor standing hidden in a far corner, leaning on his cleaning cart. 2 years ago, Ethan continued, his voice slightly trembling, I was homeless. I drew the first sketch of this building on the steering wheel of a cold car while my daughter was sick. I stand here today not because I am the most talented, but because I was given a chance. A hand was extended when I fell. The entire square was hushed. This building has a special feature, Ethan said, and pressed a button on the control panel. Slowly, smoothly, the giant dome above began to move. The glass lotus petals slid open, revealing the clear blue sky. Sunlight flooded the main lobby, shining on the faces looking up in awe. It was designed to open up, just like our lives. No matter how cold the winter, the sky is always there, waiting for us to look up. And more importantly, we cannot open it alone. We need each other. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stood up first, followed by Chloe, Maya, and the sea of people. Ethan stepped down from the podium. He didn't head toward the officials waiting to shake his hand. He walked straight to the janitor in the far corner. The man grew flustered, trying to push his cart away. "Hello," Ethan said, extending his hand. "I'm Ethan. I know you, Mr. Cole. I'm just a cleaner." "I know," Ethan smiled, gripping the man's calloused hand. "I used to do this job in the exact spot you are standing. Never think you are just anyone. You are the one who keeps this place shining." Ethan pulled out his business card. "If you need anything, or if your children need educational support, please call me. The Maya Cole Scholarship Fund is always looking for hard workers." The inauguration party ended late. Ethan and Maya strolled along the lakeside. The city lights reflected on the water, shimmering magically. "Daddy," Maya asked, holding his hand tightly, "do you remember the girl you saved, Chloe?" "I do, sweetie." "If you hadn't stopped that day, if you had gone straight to the interview, would we be rich like this now?" Ethan stopped. He looked at the brightly lit library in the distance, then down at his daughter. He thought about that scenario. If he had left Chloe to die on the sidewalk, maybe he would have been on time. Maybe he would have been hired. But he would live his life haunted. Marcus would lose his daughter and become a grieving man, possibly bankrupting the company due to depression. And Ethan would be working for a broken boss. "No, my love." Ethan knelt down, fixing her scarf. "If I hadn't stopped, I might have had money, but I would have been poor forever. I would have lost myself. I'm happy you're a good person." Maya hugged his neck tightly. "I'm happy you're my daughter, too." Ethan's phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. "Next project, a rehabilitation center for underprivileged children. Interested? Chloe wants to help design it." Ethan smiled. He texted back, "Always ready.
8 a.m. tomorrow. I won't be late. The Lake Michigan wind blew past, but this time it carried warmth. Ethan Cole, the architect who had lost everything, now realized that the greatest blueprints were not the straight lines on paper, but the curves of compassion that connected people to one another. Life had knocked him down, but the very hand he extended to help another became the foundation for him to stand up, more solid than any skyscraper.